Hello everyone, and as most of you know, the UK left the European Union almost a year ago at the end of January 2020. But the full impact of this momentous move was far from resolved at that point, and especially for the air transport sector. You see, on top of everything else the industry has faced in the wake of the COVID pandemic in 2020, the past 11 months brought great confusion and uncertainty as to whether the UK and EU would be able to avoid the dreaded no-deal scenario over trading arrangements following their divorce. And it took until December 24th, that's right, Christmas Eve, to agree the so-called EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And even now, airlines, aircraft manufacturers, and just about everyone else in the aviation ecosystem is still absorbing what this really means. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by my AIN colleague and European neighbour, Kathy Buck. She's just across the channel from me in Belgium. Hello, Kathy. Happy New Year to you, although perhaps I'm tempting fate by even saying that. But let's try and make some sense of these issues together. So firstly, Kathy, can you just remind us what has actually changed for traffic rights, the so-called freedoms of the air?
Hello, Charlie. And of course, first of all, Happy New Year to you too. And we remain positive. It all will work out. Well, first of all, when it comes to traffic rights, the third and fourth freedoms are still there, and that's for passenger services and cargo services. But now the fifth freedom, ex-EU and ex-UK, is only for cargo and receiving these rights on a bilateral country-to-country agreement. So the UK would have to agree with Germany if a UK airline would like to continue carrying cargo from the UK over Germany, for example, to Singapore. There's no restriction on capacity, pricing, and so on. So the argument could be made that the provisions are similar to most bilateral air services agreements and even liberal air services agreements. However, compared to what was pre-Brexit, it is a downgrade when all EU carriers, thus including UK airlines, had full access to each other's markets. For example, a German airline could operate London to Edinburgh, and a UK carrier could fly Paris to Rome or even Paris to Marseille, so domestically within each other's countries. Now, access to full cabotage is gone for UK in the EU and vice versa, UK airlines and the EU. Yeah. So, Charlie, while it's still very liberal, to me, the new situation, it looks like this is more of a loss for UK airlines than for EU carriers. So how are the UK airlines responding to this?
Yeah, you're right. I see it the same way, Kathy. I mean, at the end of the day, look at the geography here. The UK is a fairly big country, but of course, its market is nothing like as big as the rest of the European Union. And so, yes, especially the fifth freedom rights, these are pretty significant losses in terms of market access. And to put this in quite simple terms, last year, you and I, you as a Belgian citizen, me as a British citizen, we could have started an airline together. We could have operated anywhere in the EU, pretty much followed whatever business model we like. And the fact is, now we can't. So if we want to do that within the EU, you would have to be the majority stakeholder and majority owner, which is fine for you, but not so great for me. And if you wanted to start something
I'll be the boss.
You can be the boss. That's fine. I'm not proud. I'm just thinking of the money as usual. But if you wanted to do something in the UK, again, I would have to be the main shareholder. So it's added complexity that could stand in the way of business happening. But to your wider questions, what do UK airlines do about this? Well, of course, they have been aware of what was coming for a few years now. And I would say that some of the bigger airlines have been fairly well able to prepare for it. So a great example is EasyJet, the UK-based, UK-owned low-cost carrier. They saw this coming. They did a very sensible thing. They decided to create a subsidiary company in Austria, which is, of course, still an EU state. So now they have the option of operating both as a European airline and also as a UK airline. And I make that sound easy, but I'm sure that hundreds of lawyers had to be involved just to make that happen. Ryanair, of course, strictly speaking, an Irish carrier based still in the EU, but with a large operation in the UK. And, it has made no secret of the fact that this change could really undermine its ability to operate in the UK and reduce the attractiveness of operating from and in the UK. So I think there will be big changes. And of course, probably what we haven't seen yet is what it means to people who are trying to start new airlines. And of course, that's not the only thing that the UK now isn't part of. There are other international bodies as well. And I guess EASA is the big one, that we're no longer part of the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. That seems like a big issue. It seems to me on that, the obvious disadvantage, I guess, is for UK aerospace companies, because now suddenly there's the question of how they certify their products, whether it's complete aircraft or whether it's components for the aircraft. Is there an aircraft on the earth today that isn't now international in the sense of where all the different parts come from? I think that could be very, very complicated from a certification point of view. Also, there will now be the need for the UK to establish bilateral safety agreements with other countries that it wants to operate to and from. The US.
And that takes a long time, Charlie.
Sure, it does, absolutely. It's extremely time consuming. And these are all things that were, of course, in place under the EU structure there. So I think it could be a disadvantage for inward investment into the UK. If you're a foreign, a non-UK aerospace company and you're considering where to put an aerospace factory, would you go to the UK where suddenly you have all these extra problems when it comes to certifying equipment? So I think that is quite serious. And I wonder, Kathy, from your perspective, do we even know why the UK has stayed outside? After all, Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, and yet they cooperate perfectly happily within the EASA structure.
Yeah, well, I think that, the EU, the member countries, the Commission, I thought that everybody, EASA, was very open for the UK to remain in EASA. And initially, the expectations were that the UK would remain in EASA. Also from the UK side, I think the UKCA has mentioned several times that they were willing to remain in EASA. I think that they also saw the logic of it. Hey, we're neighbors, Charlie. It's all Europe. But at the end, apparently, it was a red line for the UK negotiators. It was a political decision, Charlie.
Yeah, you're right. And what almost makes me laugh, Kathy, if it weren't so sad, is that, I remember hearing from the British side, we can't be in EASA because EASA says they won't have us. And yet I've heard from the EASA side, no, it's the British who said that they wouldn't agree to this. It from the British perspective, and I'm trying to see it in a balanced way, their attitude was we can't accept rules from Europe. But in the case of aviation safety, to be honest, that just seems ridiculous, because we're really talking about the rules of physics here for the most part, which, there's no British rule of gravity and no European rule of gravity. There's only one rule of gravity. So I can't see why this was so controversial, but it is. And that's where we are.
That's it, but in the longer run, well, let's see what happens. And I only can hope that there is no divergence. I guess everybody in the aerospace sector just hopes that there is no regulatory divergence from the UK, from EASA, which would be bad for the industry. Imagine that you would have to certify everything once, according to rules from the UK and once according to rules from EASA. Again, we're neighbors. This is the same region. Now, from a European point of view, I think there is a deep regret, or a little bit of a regret and a fear of loss of UK know-how if UK staff would choose to move from EASA, which, as you know, is based in Cologne, to UKCA. Over the years, the UK has brought a lot of knowledge on everything that has to do with regulation, certification. And if all that know-how would move to the UK, I'm sure EASA would feel it. But, I don't know if they would be moving, Charlie.
No.
Besides that, do you know if the British CAA can manage to handle all these regulatory responsibilities that it now carries?
That's a very, very important question. And the answer is I am fearful that they may not be able to make a smooth transition. You talked about the fact what would happen to EASA if all the British experts suddenly came home. Well, from what I've seen, Kathy, the reality is they're not. They're not necessarily coming home. Quite a few British aviation people, in some cases 10 years or more ago, went to EASA, transferred to EASA, went to live in Cologne. They have successful careers there. I know several examples where they've decided, actually, I'm perfectly happy here in Germany. I'll become a German citizen and stay and work for EASA for the rest of my career. But even if the British Civil Aviation Authority could attract all its men and women home again to work for them, there's a financial question here, because suddenly the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK has gone from being kind of a small, almost a regional sub-office of EASA to being a national authority again. And that means more budget. And I have heard people in the industry say they're very concerned that the money may not simply be there to do all these tasks, at least in an efficient way. I mean, yes, I'm not saying that aircraft will fall out of the sky tomorrow in the UK, but things will have to be done more slowly and not necessarily at the pace that the industry wants. So it's a really big concern. I think when we see the next CAA budget, I guess at some point that will be this year, then maybe we'll know a bit more about that.
But Charlie, I'm sorry to interrupt you since you're talking about budget. Imagine what, the UK CA says, okay, well, we have now to, certify the pilots, MRO, and our budget is only that big. We need more, and they start to hike all the fees for everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously the money will have to come from somewhere. I suspect what will happen, first of all, is that things will still continue. All the things you're describing, licensing and approving and checking and so on, will all continue, but probably much more slowly than the industry wants. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but there will be knock-on consequences. Suddenly, you don't have all the maintenance people certified that you need. Suddenly, are there delays in getting pilots their medicals done properly? There could be lots of consequences. And yes, it could result in the CAA saying, okay, fine, if you want us to do this stuff faster, there has to be more money. That money is not coming from the government, so it's going to come from you, the industry. I can't say that's going to happen, but it seems logical it would happen. And so far, we've mainly talked about what I would call big picture issues, freedoms of the air, traffic rights, and EASA. But it's such a complex industry, isn't it? And from my perspective, I wonder if there's all sorts of types of disruption and change that we're going to see that isn't even clear yet, kind of at a microscopic level. In terms of how things operate. Do you see it that way? Do you think this could start to get even more fragmented?
Well, first of all, Charlie, if you allow me, I would like to point out that both the UK and the EU are touting this trade and cooperation agreement as a major win for free trade. And yes, no tariffs are being imposed on most products, so that's very good. However, tariff-free does not mean, I'm sorry to use this language, friction-free. There is now a border between the UK and the EU, and that means customs procedures and administration. Goods must be declared now when crossing the border. This causes a lot of new administrative hurdles. Work for air freight going between the EU and the UK, import, export, export, import. It is also unwelcome news for aerospace firms like Rolls-Royce, GKN, Airbus. The aerospace supply chain is very integrated, and some Airbus components, I'm sure you know, they shuttle hundreds of times between the facilities in the UK and the EU. So imagine the paperwork for these companies.
If I look at this honestly, I really find it hard to see this as anything less than a massive downgrade particularly for the UK side. And all the people I speak to here, even the ones who try to be more optimistic about Brexit than I am, they really struggle to come up with any positive. I mean, some of them say, well, eventually the UK will be able to have new air agreements with countries on the other side of the earth. But really, they already had the possibility of that as part of the EU. Why is this such a new, wonderful thing? I don't see it myself. Perhaps we haven't really yet seen what Brexit will mean to air travel because we're so distracted by COVID. I mean, you mentioned people traveling to the UK. You mentioned British people traveling within the EU. Of course, at the moment, hardly anybody is traveling anywhere at all. So those are hypothetical scenarios, I suppose. And, maybe this is the reality, that it won't be until COVID, God willing, is finally behind us that people really begin to understand that. I mean, you're right to say that the UK has been, in the past, historically, a really important air transport market for the European Union airlines, but maybe not so much in the future. I mean, even beyond COVID, if there are fewer business reasons to travel to the UK, fewer family reasons to travel, maybe the market will diminish in that regard. But certainly, I don't think people are going to fully appreciate what they benefited from as part of the EU from an air transport point of view until they see what's actually been lost. And I think that's still some time away.
What I'm hearing from airlines here saying, well, okay, fine. Well, what about passenger rights? Okay, both sides in the agreement says, well, we are committed, or at least UK is committed to preserving the same consumer rights. Well, as you know, this EU passenger rights regulation, 261 is very controversial. Yes. It's very good for travelers, but it's very expensive for airlines. Yes. So the UK for now says, okay, we respect it. But what, if tomorrow they say, we don't, we go our own way. Thank you very much. So, which means then that, okay, for passengers, not very good because you would not be protected the same way for flights going from the UK into Europe, which again is a little anti-competitive. But Charlie, I can imagine British Airways knocking on the door, of your government saying, well, this EU 261, it's a problem, let's just drop it.
Yeah, I could see that happening. And I think, to your earlier point, the consumers here, the airline passengers, because of COVID, still probably don't really know how they could be impacted by this. And you're right. I'm pretty confident I can say no British airline passenger ever believed that they would lose compensation protection from airlines. That was never promised. So there would be some pushback there. But it is what it is. This is our reality now. The good news, Kathy, is that you and I are still talking in a friendly way about this, and we can coexist. And I think we're going to have to agree to come back to this later in 2021, and at least we can dream of a day when we don't have to talk about COVID every day. But I fear we're going to be talking about Brexit for some time to come. But for now, it's been good chatting with you. And so from me here in the UK, and from you, Kathy, safely and happily there in the EU, in Belgium, in the heart of Brussels. Goodbye from now, and thank you for watching us.
Okay, goodbye.
Thanks for watching this AIN video. Please like, subscribe, and share it if you've enjoyed it. Also, visit AINonline.com for all the latest on the aviation industry.